Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. We're talking today with Jed of Phenix. We're going to talk about the business that you're in here, but I also want to talk to you about your own mindset journey as an entrepreneur. Why don't we start first by introducing Phenix so that our listeners have a frame of reference for who you are and what you're doing these days?
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me, Alicia. It's nice to be here. The best way to explain what we do is to give you an example. And for anybody who's a sports fan who has watched any sort of game or race or anything on their phone or tablet or computer and compared it to watching it on not only television, but someone being at the event live, there's what's known as a delay or latency in that stream that you're watching. Sometimes you hear about a play from a friend. Hey, did you see that great catch? And you haven't yet seen that great catch. Or did you see, hey, did you see that great race at the end? Did you see how he won? And he might have just ruined it for you because you haven't seen it yet. That delay is due to certain technology that those who are streaming those games have utilized to stream those games. And what we've built at Phenix is a streaming platform that enables those who own that content to stream the games with little to or no delay or latency. So we try and recreate the experience you have in the stadium or park or arena as though you were watching it from your mobile device. So we do a number of things, but the basic gist is that we eliminate that latency or delay. So everybody can watch the game at the same time, regardless of what device they're on, regardless of what internet connection they have, and regardless of what location they are in the world.
And your typical clientele for that type of business model, can you give us an idea of who that is?
Absolutely. So anybody who owns the rights to content. So we work a lot in the sports business with sports leagues and associations. We work with broadcasters who acquire rights from the leagues themselves and broadcast those games. We work with non-sports entities like auctions, where you're trying to recreate the live auction on your phone or on your computer as though you were at the auction itself. So anything where there's content related to it is the area that we sort of play in.
How challenging has it been to really build success with this type of service?
It's very challenging because there's an old saying that says nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. And if you drill down to that, what that means is if somebody walks into your office and you're IBM and you have a new technology and you want to share this with this prospect or somebody that you're trying to sell it to, they're a little bit more apt to hire you or try you because you're IBM. You have a big name behind you, a big company. And if it doesn't work, more than likely you're not going to get fired because you hired IBM and it didn't work. But as Phenix, as a startup and a company that nobody really, at least initially, has heard of, that same risk for that person to hire us is much greater because if we don't deliver, well, then they may get fired because the CEO may say, well, why did you take a chance on Phenix when you could have hired, IBM? So, and there's truth to that because we know that our technology is better than really pretty much anything else out there. And fortunately, we have a lot of clients and a lot of use cases and case studies to show people by now. But, there's still a lot of hesitation in the space to try something new and try it from a company that isn't as tried and true, if you will. And the technology is still somewhat new. So, taking a risk on that is also something that people are hesitant to do. So, yeah, there are quite a few challenges.
I'm sure there are some people who can relate to being a newer business. Perhaps they are innovative. Perhaps they don't have the credibility yet. What what do you recommend to people listening who are going through this in their own business? Because it does take a lot of resilience.
Yes, it does. It takes a lot of resiliency. It takes a lot of persistence. It takes a lot of research. You have to be even more prepared when you set up a meeting with someone. You have to know their business as much as you can know it, obviously, with what you can read and find out. Really try and understand what their pain points are. Try and shape your pitch, if you will, to their business and how it will benefit them. Too many times I've seen and I've heard about people trying to sell their business or trying to sell, what they offer, and talking too much and trying to talk about all the great things that we do and how great we are and aren't we wonderful and how you need to partner with us and isn't that great. But the truth is, it's really the opposite. Is how can they on the other side of the table take what you've built and what you've created and benefit their business and grow their business and generate whatever it is that they're trying to generate, whether it is impressions or likes or money or partners, whatever their business it leads to. You have to make sure that you're sitting on the other side of the table and understand what they're hearing, so when you leave, they walk away saying, oh wow, what he's offering me really makes sense for my business because I can improve it X, Y, and Z, and we should try and work with them. That's the goal of what you're trying to leave that audience with.
That is incredibly good advice. And I know that there are people who get it intellectually, but then when it comes to actually execute, that's a whole different story.
Indeed.
Now you specialize in the marketing side of Phenix. And so you're the perfect person to talk to because you're going through what a lot of business owners have to go through in those early stages in their business. And it really does require some mindset shifts to get out of all about me and I need to start closing some deals here, which is coming from scarcity and fear and desperation, and
Yep.
start to think differently. So when you're marketing for this business, what is the ultimate objective? Like, are there certain things that you're always kind of you're making sure that this is my foundation, I'm always coming back to this?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple things that I think you really have to think about. um, Less is more typically, and most people think more is more, and that's not the case. Nobody in a call or in a meeting just wants to hear yourself talk all the time. So listening, which has become a bit of a lost art, in my opinion, is something essential when you're in there. But from a marketing perspective, I'd say the hardest thing to do is to think of it in the long-term view, which is, to your point, not easy because you need to close deals and you need to keep the lights on and you need to, keep the business afloat. But if you think short term, you probably will be short term. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. So every time we do something, whether it be a marketing piece, advertising, a newsletter, an email, whatever campaign we're working on, we're always trying to keep a few things in mind. And that is staying true to our brand, what we stand for. We have, and I would recommend this for every business, is to kind of take a step back and sort of decide and discuss, what are your brand attributes? How do you feel you want to convey what you do into the market? is it honesty? Is it excellence? Is it, what are the things that you want to project in your business? And those things have to be adhered to regardless of what you're doing and regardless of when you do it. And again, that's not always the easiest thing, because what you do today might not lead to a sale tomorrow, but it may lead to many sales the day after tomorrow. Because no Coke build their name on impressions. You don't necessarily walk down the street and see a billboard that says, drink a Coke, and say, oh, let's go get a Coke because it's, I see that billboard and I want to go in. It doesn't work that way. It works because you've seen that billboard, and then you saw that billboard, and Coke sponsors the Olympics, and they're here and they're there and they're here and they're there. And after a while, you just see them so many different times that when you walk into your neighborhood deli or supermarket and you look at a drink, if you haven't already decided, then you see something that's maybe it's a new brand and you're like, oh, maybe I'll give that a shot. I've seen them. They sponsor the Olympics. I love the Olympics. I always watch the Olympics. Maybe there's something to that. It's not a conscious thing. It's a subconscious thing. So you have to always think about these things, about what your brand stands for and what you're trying to achieve in the long view, in the long term. And that's what you really have to stay true to.
Now I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
Because I know that you have some experience under your belt, and perhaps you can share, some of the lessons that you've learned as an entrepreneur. One of the things that we're oftentimes talking about is how we have a tendency to be our own worst enemy. We're the ones that get in our own way. And we've got some stuff that we've got to work through and overcome in order to get to those next level goals. Is there any mindset challenge that you had to overcome in order to get to where you are today?
Many. And I don't think that is, untrue for anybody. I had started a company some time ago called Mimo, and it was a branded virtual goods company. And I'll explain what that is, which is kind of interesting because now there's this term called the meta or the metaverse, where people go into these sort of virtual worlds as avatars, and they shop and they talk and they converse with people, and do all kinds of things, which, many people think that it's a new concept because Facebook or Meta started it. But in fact, it really is not a new concept. It's about 15 years old. And about 10 or 15 years ago, there were these things called virtual worlds. And some of them had names like Second Life and Habba Hotel, and in the Microsoft Xbox marketplace. And basically what it was essentially the metaverse, only kind of Meta 1.0. And it was an opportunity for people to go into these virtual environments on their computer and become an avatar of themselves, and then do what they essentially try and do in the real world, in the virtual world. Well, my idea was to create essentially a licensed merchandise company for the virtual world. So if you walk down the street, you see people wearing branded merchandise, whether it be their baseball team that they love, or, Barbie, which is popular right now. I mean, it's all this branded merchandise that you see. So our idea was to create that same type of environment only for avatars. So instead of dressing yourself in a, plain gray t-shirt like I'm wearing, maybe it would be a Shrek t-shirt, or a Barbie t-shirt. Or and then we started moving into emojis. So instead of sending you a yellow smiley face, maybe it would be a Barbie smiley face. So that was, what we did. And at the very, very early stages of our company, we were struggling to gain some traction. And we had a conversation with Hasbro, because I knew somebody there, and he was willing to take a shot with us. They had a new Transformers movie that was coming, and he was willing to give us all the branded IP, so you could go into your virtual world and dress your avatar in all this Transformers gear. But we had to pay him a fee to do it, to start. And we didn't have the money to do it. So we had met a number of different investors that were willing to kind of front us that money and get us kind of going. And we were so excited and probably desperate, frankly, that we made a deal with them. And sort of unbeknownst to us, because we were uneducated in the space at the time, we had never raised money before. They really sort of took us for a little bit of a ride and took more of the company than we ever thought. And unfortunately, later it came back to haunt us when we were trying to sell the company. So what's the lesson and what's the moral of the story is don't be desperate. If you think the deal is too good to be true, it probably is. And especially if you're trying to raise money, never give away, majority control unless you really have thought through why you're doing it and you have legal counsel and you have, many, many good reasons as to why to do it. And, we learned the hard way. But I think that there are lessons there to make sure that people don't find themselves in that desperate stage. We were so excited to get that deal with Hasbro that we sort of didn't think through the ramifications of everything else.
When you say don't be desperate, that's definitely a mindset. And it's a mindset that a lot of business owners go through and some chronically struggle with.
Oh, yeah.
When people have those really deep-rooted subconscious beliefs and they're kind of in fight or flight all the time, they're living in that state of scarcity, it is a sort of a survival thing. Now, your situation was one where you sort of had this big vision, this big goal, and so the temptation to have that goal realized, I'm sure, was also sort of skewing your better judgment, you could say.
Absolutely.
Were you also, when you made the decision to say yes to those investors, was there a fear that maybe some other investor wouldn't come? Did you think that that was the only chance that you had to get the money that you wanted, or what was going on there? I'm just curious.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I would say that I think it was a combination of things. One was we saw that, here was this sort of big recognizable brand in Hasbro that if we were to do a deal with them, it would sort of give us instant credibility because we were nothing. I mean, we had this great vision and this great business plan, but that and 2 cents gets you nowhere. So we were trying our hardest to pitch brands to try and join, to come with us and give us their IP to launch the company. And we were having very minimal success. I mean, we did a couple of little deals, but nothing of consequence. And here was the first time that we had met with, we had other meetings with Universal and some of these other big guys, but this was the first big, noticeable, recognizable brand that said, yes, we want to work with you. We see this as an opportunity and we want to do it. And we just felt like if we didn't do this, we might never have another opportunity like this. And it would sort of put us on the map. So when we approached the investors, I think our excitement probably came through too much, and we should have tempered it a little bit, and should have been a little bit more, I don't want to say nonchalant, but less desperate, if you will. I mean, I hate to keep using that word, but and said, instead of the sort of, hey, we have to do this deal, or we're going to lose out, blah, blah, blah. I think you have to kind of take a step back and say, hey, Mr. Investor, we think this is a really good deal for both of us. and let's talk about it and see how we can both benefit. And maybe, if you see what we see, then you'd be willing to give us, some startup seed money to get us off our feet, that kind of conversation. And that's a maturity that we didn't have. And we were too kind of fly by the seat of our pants at the time. And I think that we didn't do enough research in speaking with other investors and speaking with people who have dealt with investors and understood what they look for and what they could do basically. I mean, there's a longer story here. These two guys didn't turn out to be the greatest people in the world, but neither here nor there. There's a lesson there to make sure that you're not projecting yourself as, wow, this is the greatest deal since sliced bread, and you have to do this because you're going to get taken advantage of.
There's probably a couple of sub lessons in this as well, which you you kind of touched on without actually saying it, right? The power of mentorship, right? Get some education,
Right.
The power of sort of mastering yourself.
Yep.
Is a big one, especially for business owners or anyone who is playing the role of salesman, in their business. There's a lot of different ways that I'm sure people can see, as entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, they're visionaries. They've got the dream, and they're only sort of skilled in the execution, in limited quantities.
Yep, that's true. No,
So
I can give you, I mean, look here at Phenix, our founder had the vision of what we do, many years ago, way before streaming was at all as popular as it is today. And he is an engineer by trade, and a brilliant mind. But over time, he realized that what he wasn't good at was being the CEO. And what he wasn't good at necessarily was managing the company and managing everybody in the company. And so, and that takes a big step and to be able to live, to say that, to say, hey, wait a second, maybe it's better for us to bring in somebody else who can run the day-to-day of our business and let me focus on what I do best. And in his case, it was engineering. In someone else's case, it may be they're the best salesperson. They could sell ice to an Eskimo, but managing the team and managing, other parts of the business isn't necessarily what they're good at. So I think, one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur to recognize is not only what they're good at, but what they're not as good at. And so to make sure that if you have the ability to bring on other people, make sure they're not the same as you, and they're not just going to yes you to death and just say yes, 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 whatever you do is great. Make sure that they're a counterbalance, they're like the sort of the yin and the yang, and make sure that they fit, they have skills that maybe you don't, they have strengths that maybe you don't. So when you're building your business, you're building it in a way that you're putting in pieces of the puzzle that fit. And I think that that's really important.
excellent advice, and a really good time for you to share with our listeners how they can connect with you. How can they learn more about Phenix?
Sure. So our website is www.phenixrts.com, and that's spelled PHENIXRTS.com, no O. And the company was sort of named from the god of Phoenix rising from the ashes. So that's how to reach us. Please look at our site. You'll learn a little bit. And if I can ever be of service to anybody, let me know.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jed, for being with us today.
My pleasure, Alicia.
And thank you to all of our listeners. You know, we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.